The People's Army of Vietnam, also known as the Vietnamese People's Army and the Vietnam People's Army, is the military forces of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. PAVN is a part of Vietnam People's Armed Forces and includes Ground Force, Navy, Air Force, Border Defense Force, and Coast Guard. However, Vietnam does not have a specific separate ground force or army branch. All of the ground troops, Army Corps, military districts, and specialized arms belong to the Ministry of Defense, directly under command of the Central Military Commission, Minister of Defense, and General Staff. The military flag of the PAVN is the flag of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam with the words Quét Thang added in yellow at the top left. During the French Indochina War, the PAVN was often referred to as the Viet Minh. In the context of the Vietnam War, the army was referred to as the North Vietnamese Army. This allowed writers, the U.S. military, and the general public to distinguish Northern Communists from the Southern Communists, or Viet Cong. However, both groups ultimately worked under the same command structure. According to Hanoi's official history, the Viet Cong was a branch of the VPA. In 2010, the PAVN undertook the role of leading the 1000th anniversary parade in Hanoi by performing their biggest parade in Vietnam's history. Establishment. The PAVN was first conceived in September 1944 at the First Revolutionary Party military conferences, Armed Propaganda Brigades, to educate, recruit and mobilize the Vietnamese to create a main force to drive the French colonial and Japanese occupiers from Vietnam, under the guidelines of Ho Chi Minh. Though no NGIAP was given the task of establishing the brigades, and the Armed Propaganda Unit for National Liberation came into existence on 22 December 1944. The first formation was made up of 31 men and 3 women, armed with 2 revolvers, 17 rifles, 1 light machine gun, and 14 breech-loading flintlocks. The group was renamed the Vietnam Liberation Army in May 1945. In September, the army was again renamed the Vietnam National Defense Army. At this point, it had about 1,000 soldiers. In 1950, it officially became the People's Army of Vietnam, though No NGIAP went on to become the first full general of the VPA on 28 May 1948, and famous for leading the PAVN in victory over French forces at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954, and being in overall command against US-backed South Vietnam at the fall of Saigon on 30 April 1975. French Indochina War. On 7 January 1947, its 1st Regiment, the 102nd Capital Regiment, was created for operations around Hanoi. Over the next 2 years, the 1st Division, the 308th Division, later well known as the Pioneer Division, formed by the 88th Tu Vu Regiment and the 102nd Capital Regiment. By late 1950, the 308th Division had a full 3 infantry regiments, when it was supplemented by the 36th Regiment. At that time, the 308th Division was also backed by the 11th Battalion that later became the main force of the 312th Division. In late 1951, after launching 3 campaigns against 3 French strongpoints in the Red River Delta, the PAVN refocused on building up its ground forces further, with 5 new divisions, each of 10–15,000 men, created. The 304th Glory Division at Thanh Hoa, the 312th Victory Division in Vinh Phuc, the 316th Bong Lao Division in the Northwest Border Region, the 320th Delta Division in the North Red River Delta, the 325th Binh Tri Thien Division in Binh Tri Thien Province. Also in 1951, the 1st Artillery Division, the 351st Division was formed, and later, before Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954. For the first time in history, it was equipped by 24 captured 105 mm US howitzers supplied by the Chinese People's Liberation Army. The first 6 divisions became known as the original PAVN, Steel and Iron, divisions. In 1954, 4 of these divisions defeated the French Union forces at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, ending 83 years of French rule in Indochina. Vietnam War. Soon after the 1954 Geneva Accords, the 330th and 338th Divisions were formed by Southern Vietnam members who had moved north in conformity with that agreement, and by 1955, 6 more divisions were formed. The 328th, 332nd, and 350th in the north of the Drive, the 305th and the 324th near the DMZ, and the 335 Division of soldiers repatriated from Laos. In 1957, the theaters of the war with the French were reorganized as the first 5 military regions, and in the next 2 years, several divisions were reduced to brigade size to meet the manpower requirements of collective farms. By 1958, it was becoming increasingly clear that the South Vietnamese government was solidifying its position as an independent republic under Ngo Thinh Diem, who staunchly opposed the terms of the Geneva Accord that required a national referendum on unification of North and South Vietnam under a single national government, and North Vietnam prepared to settle the issue of unification by force. In May 1959, the first major steps to prepare infiltration routes into South Vietnam were taken. Group 559 was established, a logistical unit charged with establishing routes into the south via Laos and Cambodia, which later became famous as the Ho Chi Minh Trail. At about the same time, Group 579 was created as its maritime counterpart to transport supplies into the south by sea. Most of the early infiltrators were members of the 338th Division, former Southerners who had been settled at Chiang Mai from 1954 onwards. Regular formations were sent to southern Vietnam from 1965 onwards. The 325th Division's 101B Regiment and the 66th Regiment of the 304th Division met U.S. forces on a large scale, a first for the PAVN, at the Battle of Iowa Drang Valley in November 1965. The 308th Division's 88A Regiment, the 312th Division's 141A, 141B, 165A, 209A, the 316th Division's 174A, the 325th Division's 95A, 95B. The 320A Division also faced the U.S. forces, which included the 1st Cavalry Division, the 101st Airborne Division, the 173d Airborne Brigade, the 4th Infantry Division, the 1st Infantry Division, and the 25th Infantry Division. Those PAVN formations were seen as extremely brave forces by the U.S. forces. Many of those formations later became main forces of the 3rd Division in Binh Dinh, the 5th Division of 7th Military Zone, the 7th and 9th Divisions, the 10th Dak Ta Division in Dak Ta, Highland in 1972 south of Vietnam. General Trn Van Tra, one-time commander of the B-2 Front HQ, confirms that even though the PAVN and the NLFV were confident in their ability to defeat the regular ARVN forces, U.S. intervention in Vietnam forced him to reconsider their operations. The decision was made to continue to pursue main force engagements even though there were others in the south. They were not military people who wanted to go back to guerrilla war, but the strategic aims were adjusted to meet the new reality. We had to change our plan and make it different from when we fought the Saigon regime, because we now had to fight two adversaries, the United States and South Vietnam. We understood that the U.S. Army was superior to our own logistically, in weapons and in all things. So strategically we did not hope to defeat the U.S. Army completely. Our intentions were to fight a long time and cause heavy casualties to the United States. so the United States would see that the war was unwinnable and would leave. During the Vietnamese Lunar New Year Tet holiday starting on the 30th of January, 1968, the PAVN launched a general offensive in more than 60 cities and towns throughout south of Vietnam against the U.S. Army and Army of the Republic of Vietnam, beginning with operations in the border region to try and draw U.S. forces and ARVN troops out of the major cities. In sequential coordinated attacks, the United States Embassy in Saigon, Presidential Palace, headquarters of ARVN and ARVN's Navy, TV and radio stations, Tan Son Nhat International Airport in Saigon were attacked and invaded by commando forces known as Dak Hong. This offensive became known as the Tet Offensive. The offensives caught the world's attention day by day and demoralized the U.S. public and military, both at home and abroad. The PAVN sustained heavy losses of its main forces in southern military zones. Some of its regular forces and command structure had to escape to Laos and Cambodia to avoid counterattacks from U.S. forces and ARVN, while local guerrillas forces and political organizations in South Vietnam were exposed and had a hard time remaining within the Mekong Delta area, due to the extensive use of the Phoenix program, and were never restored. Although the PAVN lost militarily to the U.S. forces and ARVN in the South, the political impact of the war in the United States was strong. Public demonstrations increased in ferocity and quantity after the Tet Offensive. Onwards from 1970, the 5th, 7th, and 9th Divisions had fought in Cambodia against U.S. forces, ARVN, and Cambodian Prime Minister Lon Nol's troops, but they had gained new allies. The Khmer Rouge and guerrilla fighters supporting deposed Prime Minister Sihanouk. In 1975, the PAVN were successful in aiding the Khmer Rouge in toppling the Lon Nol's US-backed regime, despite heavy US bombing. Nearly 2 years after the United States' withdrawal from Indochina in accord with the terms of the 1973 Paris Peace Accords, the PAVN launched a spring offensive aimed at uniting Vietnam. Without direct support of its U.S. ally, and suffering from stresses caused by dwindling aid, the ARVN was ill-prepared to confront the highly motivated PAVN, and despite numerical superiority of the ARVN in tactical aircraft, armored vehicles and overwhelming 3-to-1 odds in regular troops, the PAVN quickly secured victory within 2 months and captured Saigon on 30 April 1975, effectively ending the 70 years of conflict stemming from French colonial invasion of the 19th century and unifying Vietnam. Military activities. Towards the second half of the 20th century, the armed forces of Vietnam would participate in organized incursions to protect its citizens and allies against aggressive military factions in the neighboring Indo-Chinese countries of Laos and Cambodia, and the defensive border wars with China. The PAVN had forces in Laos to secure the Ho Chi Minh Trail and to militarily support the Pathet Lao. In 1975, the Pathet Lao and NVA forces succeeded in toppling the Royal Laotian regime and installing a new and pro-Hanoi government, the Lao People's Democratic Republic, that rules Laos to this day. Parts of Sihanouk's neutral Cambodia were occupied by troops as well. A pro-US coup led by Lon Nol in 1970 led to the foundation pro-US Khmer Republic state. This marked the beginning of the Cambodian Civil War. The PAVN aided Khmer Rouge forces in toppling Lon Nol's government in 1975. In 1978, along with the FUNSK Cambodian Salvation Front, the Vietnamese and ex-Khmer Rouge forces succeeded in toppling Pol Pot's Democratic Kampuchea regime and installing a new government, the People's Republic of Kampuchea. During the Sino-Vietnamese War and the Sino-Vietnamese conflicts 1979–90, Vietnamese forces would conduct cross-border raids into Chinese territory to destroy artillery ammunition. This greatly contributed to the outcome of the Sino-Vietnamese War, as the Chinese forces ran out of ammunition already at an early stage and had to call in reinforcements. While occupying Cambodia, Vietnam launched several armed incursions into Thailand in pursuit of Cambodian guerrillas that had taken refuge on the Thai side of the border, both in Cambodia and in Laos. The heavily armed and battle-hardened People's Army of Vietnam were a valuable ally to the Pathet Lao and the Khmer Rouge forces, providing economic and military aid, also with new weapons, technologies and intelligence. Some claimed that just like the U.S. Army's relationship with the ARVN, Kingdom of Laos and the Khmer Republic, the PAVN was the real power standing behind them, and played key roles in bringing both the Khmer Rouge and Pathet Lao to power. Peacetime. During peaceful periods, the PAVN has actively been involved in Vietnam's workforce to develop the economy of Vietnam, to coordinate national defense and the economy. The PAVN has regularly sent troops to aid with natural disasters such as flooding, landslides, etc. The PAVN is also involved in such areas as industry, agriculture, forestry, fishery and telecommunications. The PAVN has numerous small firms which have become quite profitable in recent years. However, recent decrees have effectively prohibited the commercialization of the military. Conscription is in place for every male, age 18 to 25 years old, though females can volunteer to join. International presence. The Foreign Relations Department of the Ministry of National Defense organizes international operations of the PAVN. Apart from its occupation of half of the disputed Spratly Islands, which have been claimed as Vietnamese territory since the 17th century, Vietnam has not officially had forces stationed internationally since its withdrawal from Cambodia and Laos in early 1990. The Center for Public Policy Analysis and non-governmental organizations, as well as Laotian and Hmong human rights organizations, including the Lao Human Rights Council, Inc., and the United League for Democracy in Laos, Inc., have provided evidence that since the end of the Vietnam War, significant numbers of Vietnamese military and security forces continue to be sent to Laos, on a repeated basis, to quell and suppress Laotian political and religious dissident and opposition groups, including the peaceful 1999 Laos Students for Democracy protest in Vientiane in 1999 and the Hmong Rebellion. Rudolf Rummel has estimated that 100,000 Hmong perished in genocide between 1975 and 1980 in collaboration with PAVN. For example, in late November 2009, shortly before the start of the 2009 Southeast Asian Games in Vientiane, the PAVN undertook a major troop surge in key rural and mountainous provinces in Laos where Lao and Hmong civilians and religious believers, including Christians, have sought sanctuary. Organization. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces is the President of Vietnam, though this position is nominal and real power is assumed by the Central Military Commission of the ruling Communist Party of Vietnam. The Secretary of Central Military Commission is the de facto commander and now is Nguyen Phu Trong. The Minister of National Defense oversees operations of the Ministry of Defense and the PAVN. He also oversees such agencies as the General Staff and the General Logistics Department. However, military policy is ultimately directed by the Central Military Commission of the ruling Communist Party of Vietnam. Ministry of Defense is the lead organization, highest command and management of the Vietnam People's Army. General Staff Department is leading agency all levels of the Vietnam People's Army, command all of the armed forces, which functions to ensure combat readiness of the armed forces and manage all military activities in peace and war. General Political Department is the agency in charge of Communist Party affairs, political work within PAVN, which operates under the direct leadership of the Secretariat of the Communist Party of Vietnam and the Central Military Party Committee. General Military Intelligence Department is an intelligence agency of the Vietnamese government and military. General Logistical Department is the agency in charge to ensure the full logistical and military unit. General Technical Department is the agency in charge to ensure equipped technical means of war for the Army and each unit. General Military Industry Department is the agency in charge guide task to defense perform and production.